Welcome to Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I am your host, Sadia, and this is my mother, Ima. Hey, Ima.
Chag Sameach,
Chag
mi
Sameach.
Iko, mi querida Iko.
Yes. We had some trouble starting the podcast this week because of Yom Tovim. But it all worked itself out. Everything is good to go. We're ready to start. So, what we talked about previously, we kind of prepped a little bit. First experience of a new invention. And we wanted to talk about a few of them, but the first one we're going to talk about was computers. So, Emo, what was your first feelings and thoughts when you saw a computer?
My first feelings, well, the first computers were during the 1980s. It was the Atari. And the irony was Atari was an American company, but they didn't think that they could make it with an American name. So they took on a Japanese sounding name, thinking
That's funny.
people would buy from them. And the only thing that they were used for at the time were games. So I get these calls from Atari to buy their computer. I said, okay, how much is your computer? $1,000. So I said to them, well, I said, I would like a computer to be able to put my carpool list, my shopping list, and I'm telling them all the things that we do with computers today.
Yeah.
That I wanted to do then. And the lady said, I'm sorry, our computers don't do any of that. I said, then what good is your computer? She goes, you can play games on it. And I said, for $1,000, I'll go to the toy store and buy $1,000 worth of board games. I don't need your computer.
Yeah, but honestly, the Atari, they make video games. There's also back in the 80s, there was, I think the Mac had something going on. There was a few other computers that would do exactly what you're talking about. So that's why I'm a little confused, but I think
I don't know. Evidently, or maybe it wasn't available to the public at the time. But I remember my doctor telling me, a pediatrician telling me that when Sinai Hospital went fully computerized,
yeah,
and he used the computer for the first time, he figured, okay, he went on there, he typed in the information he needed, he got the information, and then he turned it off. He just switched it off.
Oh gosh.
And he says, boy, were those doctors at Sinai Hospital mad with him.
Jeez.
Because in those days, if you just shut down your computer like that, guess what? You lost all the information.
Oh my gosh. So I was gonna ask you then, there's a few other inventions that, like, I was surprised that you actually remembered or it was an impact. Electrical waffle irons.
My mother didn't use them. She didn't go in for newfangled stuff. But the first time I got it was a small one of those electric waffle irons. Let's put it this way: I was wiping up the batter from all around the counter after I put in too much batter. After a while, I realized that with the new electric waffle irons, you don't really need to use that much batter. It was a small square electric waffle iron. It wasn't like one of these big Belgium waffle irons.
Oh wow.
But I don't know how many years ago they came out with these little mini cupcake makers, and you could just put a little bit of batter in the cupcake tins, close it, and 2 minutes later have like 20 little cupcakes made. So there was a shliach in one of the places in Maryland, and I was talking to her, and every year they made these Shalach Manas packages, like hundreds of them, to mail out to Jews in the area. And so she would use these little cupcake makers and make these little cupcakes to be able to put in the Shalach Manas packages. And she was saying what a machaya it was, that she literally was able to make hundreds of them within like 10 minutes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm just going down a list here. What about the fax machine? It's like that's an invention that's like it was convenience literally for like maybe 20 years before it became
Yes.
obsolete.
Mhm. I remember the great thing about the fax machine. I couldn't believe it. It was amazing how it was like a miracle how you could take anything you wanted, put it in the fax machine, press the phone numbers, and the person received it on the other end. It was like it was like a miracle. It was like, how on earth does this possibly work? It was, but the first thing though was to finally figure out like and how do you put it took a while to figure out how to put the copy in, because with the old copiers you would lay your copy in upside down. With the fax machine you like kind of just fed it in normally, and I remember the old dial-up system. You'd hear
Yeah,
you'd hear
yeah.
the dialing up, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, and you would try to do it again and again. Sometimes it took a few times when it first invented to actually get that copy out there to the person you were trying to get it out to. Thank you.
But what about like when you were a kid, when there was like maybe color TVs, or
Oh
when
yeah, that was funny. When I was a kid, when they first came out with color TVs, they had these dials on them that you fidgeted with to get color combinations. And of course, when we were kids, we liked to play with the dials, and it turned all the people's faces green and pink and all sorts of colors. We would sit there laughing and just fidgeting with this thing. My parents did not get a color TV at first. They said, "Hey, it's an extra expense. We don't need the black and white is just as good." My parents were not the type of people that were about to spend money on the latest invention. Then there was that kid I was babysitting for in a very rich neighborhood, and he said, "I'm sorry, the color TV is broken. You're gonna have to watch the black and white."
oh, the
Aw.
horror.
In fact, there was a joke about very wealthy kids who that's how their parents punished them, that night they could not watch the color TV, they had to watch the black and white.
So I know, like,
The ultimate of punishments.
I guess in a way, like, what
Oh,
about
did I mention about the shoe X-ray?
no,
They
tell
eventually
me.
took off the
Oh,
market because it was high in radiation.
no, please tell me.
Okay, they had these. It was like a large vertical box, and you could try on your shoes that you were buying in the shoe store. You put your feet with the shoe under this like you stood on it, and then you put your feet under this like square hole, and you looked through the top of it, and it was an X-ray machine, and you could see the bones of your toes through the shoe, so you could see how the shoe fit, so if it was a perfect fit or not. Like I said, they took them off the market because they found they were chock full of radiation.
Oh gosh.
And then there was with television. I remember, I think we mentioned about how all people in my generation would wake up early in the morning, come downstairs to live because the TV was in the living room. Thank you. And they would go over to the TV and turn it on, and they'd stand right there against the television in their pajamas, sucking in all that nice radiation. The TV at the time, the radiation was higher than TVs much later on. Later on, they backed off on the radiation. So, but I was reading an interesting book about the first atomic bomb experiments.
Yeah.
And I'm reading, this book was written like in the 1950s, making it, it was an actual account of what they went through. And I was holishing reading this. I read this book like around 1974.
Okay.
It was written in the mid 1950s. And it talked about how the soldiers would go to these fields. They would just get behind like this barrier, and they would put these like coverings over their eyes and cover their ears, and they would actually explode the atomic bomb.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, the soldiers would run onto the field to laugh and to pick up like all these rocks that were like totally melted and in different shapes, and how they were laughing about what the atomic bomb did to all these like rocks and you want one? Go ahead, take it.
Thank you.
These pieces of lead and everything. and me from 1974 knew, idiots, you're exposing yourself to all this radiation. As a matter of fact, there was a lawsuit 20 years later. Indeed, many of these soldiers came down with leukemia, and there was a massive lawsuit at the time against the United States government
Oh, wow.
that these soldiers brought against them that served in the 1950s in these atomic bomb experiments.
Well, it's funny you say that because I remember someone that went to our shul, he passed away, and he was a medic and a gunner in Vietnam.
Yeah, I know who you're talking
67
about. Yeah.
Yeah, from 67 to
Mhm.
73. And I remember having a conversation with him, and he was telling me that he was exposed to Agent Orange, which was a chemical that
Yes.
they used in Vietnam, and he had medical
Mhm.
issues because of that. And like
Yes.
the VA, like they tried working with him and whatnot, but like I think there were some problems that he had too.
Mm.
But like because I'm trying to think. I mean, I have a whole long list, but I think I remember like you were saying that things like seat belts and other safety mechanisms like airbags, like the experience that you had when it first came out, some people even were protesting it.
Well, the seatbelt situation, it took manufacturers time to catch up. A lot of people wanted seatbelts, and at that time, you had to pay extra,
Oh,
and
wow.
quite a few $100s extra if you wanted seatbelts. Eventually, though, the government mandated it, which was good that they mandated it. But I remember the debate that went on about the seatbelt, how people were talking about accidents where the seatbelt actually impaired the person's ability to try to get out like of a burning car and actually contributed to people dying. But that is where that basically the average person, the average accident, lives and injuries could definitely be saved by seatbelts. There was a very famous sports announcer at the time named Bailey Goss,
Mm-hmm.
and he was killed in a car accident. He at that time he was not wearing a seatbelt because seatbelts were not mandated, and he hit the windshield. I remember my parents talking about it and saying, "Imagine had Bailey Goss been wearing a seatbelt, he would have been alive today."
Wow. I mean, what about with you and your friends when you were teenagers? Was there anything that new that came out back then that you really, took advantage of or you're really intrigued by?
Well, you mentioned something about calculators one time.
Yeah.
When calculators first came out, it was considered cheating. Any student caught with a calculator during a math or science test would it would be confiscated and you get an automatic F on the test.
Oh, wow.
You were expected to use your brains.
Jeez Louise.
Mm-hmm. And we
but-
did. Believe me, that when I was taking trig analyt and geometry and all sorts of like higher mathematics, I was calculating numbers on paper in the billions.
Wow. That's cool.
I never used a calculator. As a matter of fact, I was with a woman one time who she was a real estate agent. We were calculating like house payments. Your father and I were considering moving, as we always were the entire time we lived in our house. We were always considering moving.
Yep.
Never did, but except for finally when your father retired. But she says to me, "How much is 7 times 8?" And I said, 56. She goes, "You're wrong. It's 57." I said, "Do it again." She had pressed the wrong button, which shows you the importance of knowing your math. You can make a mistake. You can press the wrong button, and that's why you should know basic math.
Oh, 100%. I mean, when I'm at work, I do math so much that certain things I just know. Like you just understand like a quarter, an eighth, a 16th, a 32nd. Like you know these things so quickly. But it's also the idea where it's like, there was this game called Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
Oh, I remember that.
And it was a whole thing of like trying to show it was like I guess the first impressions like, oh, you're so dumb. You really don't realize how smart fifth graders are. But it's really like how much useless information fifth graders need to know and what kind of information you really need to know to function in this world as an adult.
Well, I don't know if you heard about this, but DeSantis was talking about college education.
Yeah.
And he brought up some points that people have been thinking about for decades but haven't voiced. He basically was talking about the value of a college education.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, it's one thing if somebody knows they want to be a doctor, knows they want to be a lawyer, knows they want to be a teacher, knows they want to be an engineer, an
Yeah.
architect, and you need a BA degree for this, like a master's, maybe a PhD. Okay. If you know definitely what you want to go into and a college degree is required, fine. But he says we have a lot of people who are going into a tremendous amount of debt, coming out with unmarketable degrees, and are winding up working in jobs, in many cases, that only require a high school diploma after borrowing all that money and spending all that money. And he says he thinks that high school students should not be, he called it being funneled. He says it's unfair to automatically funnel high school students into college. High school students need to look at other options and think about them. And he gave an example. He says, truck drivers making the six figures. Let's
Yeah.
face it, truck drivers make a lot more than people with BA degrees in many cases. And I was thinking about the people I've met who have associate degrees or who have gone for like a 6-month training course.
Yeah.
And wow, and these people made tremendous amounts of money, much more than your father and I, both he and I had BA degrees.
See,
Tremendous
that's-
amounts more. I met when we were in Israel.
Yeah.
Your father and I met a man who was a retired lumberjack. Oh, he's a lumberjack. He's
Yeah.
okay.
Yes.
And his name was from Oregon. He was a Christian man from Oregon.
Yeah.
And he and his wife, after they retired, decided, this was their dream to go to the Holy Land to see all the, old Bible spots. They promised themselves this. He was making 6 figures with a high school diploma. So he was telling us, people didn't understand. He says, they think a lumberjack just comes in with the buzz saw and just chops down the tree, yada, yada, that's it. No. He says, you have to know every single type of tree that grows in that area, because every different species of tree has a different way of needing to be cut down. And if you do
Interesting.
not cut it the right way, the wood is going to be totally ruined and useless. And you're going to lose a lot of money.
Wow.
Yep. And we didn't realize how complicated it was. And what an education basically it was.
Well, the thing is also, and I was duped, because I remember being in high school and being in middle school and speaking to people who, I went to camp with, and they were in Lubavitch camp. And in Lubavitch, they don't really focus on college education that much. They kind of be like, you don't need to go to have a college education. Don't focus on it. There's other options, other avenues. And I was just mind boggled. I'm like, what do you mean? You need to go to college. You need to have a degree. You need to get to make that money. You can't do anything but a college degree. And like, after I went through college and had my own little journey, I was like, wow, they really had a point. Like, it's kind of stupid. Like, why should I go ahead and be swimming in debt for something that makes like no sense? Like, it is absolutely ridiculous, And that's where like it does kind of have a point where it's just kind of useless.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Like I said, it's what it is we need to be vocationally focused. Don't just think, well, college. Stop. Think, what profession do you want to go into?
Yeah.
And does this profession require a college degree? Okay, if it does, that's one thing. If it doesn't, that's that's something to be considered.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a man. I think there's so many friends of mine, like one man in particular, who has a degree in urban planning. He's working behind a deli counter.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
Look, if you can pay your bills, that's where it gets to a point. I don't care. I really don't care.
Listen, you're in a profession that you like, that you wanted to go into.
Yeah, no,
It's a
I
good
understand.
profession,
I
yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
But let's
Although
back.
what I like about whenever I get these calls from people about, hey, would you like to lower your college debt? I said, I don't have a college debt. I made money in college. So I did. I got a full scholarship. Plus, I worked like 2 and 3 different part-time jobs and saved my money. I made a profit when I graduated college. I was able to afford a car and a trip to Switzerland and Israel.
Oh wow. So back to what we were saying beforehand. So I guess
I became bankrupt when I married your father.
of course. What was your impression of the internet when it first came out?
Um, I'm trying to think. Mhm. Oh, well, in Chabad, before the internet, we had that. We had the internet. We had the telephone dial-up, where when the Rebbe had a Fabringen, we used to what you do is you could rent these transistor radios that had interpreters on them for the Fabringens. And we went to this building and they had these desks. The desks said German, French, Russian, English, Hebrew, and you could buy whatever transistor radio would give you the interpretation you were looking for of the Rebbe's Fabringens. And we would be sitting there waiting for the Fabringen to begin, and you could hear over your earphones the sounds from the main center where they were dialing up countries all over the world. You could hear people dialing in, you hear voices saying Melbourne, you can say Moscow, you hear all these people calling in from announcing their city. Hi, yeah, we're connected, that they were connected.
Yeah.
Greenland. That was quite amazing. Now, when the internet first started, we had some friends that we used to have over for Shabbos who they were working on like one of the first internet businesses. And these people told me at that time you had to sign up for a time slot on the internet. And the best time slot was in the middle of the night. So they actually had to wait for 12 midnight. Their time slot was 12 midnight to 2 in the morning. And you had to do everything, like all your business had to be done within that 2-hour slot.
Oh,
I'll tell you the truth though, as far as like the internet and the computer.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wasn't impressed.
Really?
I just said, my idea, and the cell phone was like when the cell phone first came out, it was expensive. And a lot of friends of mine and I said, who needs it? We have a telephone. We don't need a cell phone.
Jeez.
But then when it became cheaper and everybody was finally getting cell phones, we saw what a brucha it was. That this is fantastic. I mean, like if you're stuck on the road, something's wrong, you can pick up your cell phone, you can call your family, tell them where you are. And the funny thing was, you had all these from people saying, "Oh, this is evil. Oh, this is horrible. Our kids are being exposed to all this, horrible, non-Toradic information." I never saw it like that. I've always thought it was a bracha and a safety feature. And when they passed, when they said in school, the rule was that they didn't want any students having their cell phones.
Yeah.
I spoke to the principal of Beis Yaakov High School. I said, I want my daughter to keep her cell phone on her at all times. As far as I'm concerned, this is a safety feature. And at Columbine, the way that the students were able to get in touch with the police and get help was that there were some students that were hiding in a closet that used their cell phones, had their cell phones on them. And I mentioned this to the principal at the high school. And I said, this is a safety feature, especially for a girl. I want my daughter to always have her cell phone on her. And he said, well, I'm sorry, those are the rules. They can be exposed to all sorts of foreign, non-Semitic ideas. I go, look, I said, being exposed to non-Semitic ideas versus their lives. If God forbid there's some sort of building invasion and they have to hide and call the police, I said, I want my daughter to always have her cell phone on her. So he said, well, I'm sorry, they're not allowed, yada, yada. You know what I mean? I hate to say it, but to argue with those people is like getting you into a brick wall. So I just told you kids very quietly, I said, look, hide your phone, turn your phones off and hide them. But I want you to keep your phones on you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember my school had this whole rule where you weren't allowed to have cell phones. And I had this cute little trick because there were moments where they would do pat downs, where they would pat the kids down to make sure they didn't have a cell phone or check their locker. And I actually had a jock strap. Ema, can you possibly go somewhere where there's not a lot of noise? I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah,
I
maybe
know
go
they're
outside or something.
they're listening to.
Sorry,
It's kind of loud, guys.
yeah, no, I know
I'll go
it's
into
been
another
going on for a
room.
while. I'm trying not to say anything. I'm at
Okay,
my
they're
limit
watching.
right now.
Yeah, they're watching a movie.
Yes, thank
Okay,
you. Just
I'll go into another room here.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I actually had like a jock strap and I hid it in the bathroom. And that's where I had, I wasn't worried about pat downs.
Yeah.
I think
What about the radiation?
we'll find out in the future. But like that's the other thing. It's just, that's a different topic we could talk about maybe next week about the ridiculous rules schools have.
Well, we
But
already covered that, but
did we?
I
Oh yeah.
feel this way. I feel this way about it. Look, I had a education professor in college who said it's every student's divine right, if they choose so, to fail. And if you're going to be stupid enough to plug into your cell phone, to not pay attention and fail your test, so be it. It's your own fault. You'll suffer the consequences of that.
Yeah.
But I don't think the schools have a right to pat anyone down. I didn't know that they were doing this. I wish I had known at the time. But to pat kids down, to check through their things, to treat them like criminals, no, I'm sorry, that should not be. I'm sorry.
But that's a problem with schools in general, where they treat the kids like criminals. I mean, public schools, there's police officers, you have hall monitors, you have all these things treating you like a freaking prisoner. I remember being in middle school and high school, I felt like that. It's just you don't feel like you're being educated. You feel like you're trying to getting caught by doing something that you're not doing anything wrong.
So true. There was this one girl who was wearing a sweater that had red and white stripes.
Yeah.
And the teacher, when she came into the room, laughed and said, "Don't you think that sweater's a little depressing?"
Oh my god! Red and white.
Red and white stripes, prison uniform. The old prison uniforms
with
the red and white stripes.
Red and white. I thought they were black and white.
No, years ago. Years ago, the prison uniforms years ago, like you're talking about, like in the last century or something, all had red and white stripes.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't really.
When you see cartoons, when you see like old cartoons that shows prisoners.
I thought they're always in black and white.
I'm almost sure it was. I'm not sure it was red and white. Well, we can look it up.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
Prison uniforms of the last century.
Pearson. I think
of the 1800s. 1800s.
Yeah. Anyways, moving on. What about text messaging? What was your experience with text messaging?
My first experience with text messaging was I didn't exactly know what to do. And my tech support, your sisters, showed me how to send text messages and how to type things out on them, using the keyboard, and how to make capitals and this. So my first text message was to your sister. We were shopping at some store, and so we were in different sections of the store, and so I sent her a text message about where I was, and and when we should meet up. And being very trained in English grammar, that was my forte in school. I always got A's in English grammar. I texted her a few messages, and afterwards, when we finally met up, she says to me, "I love reading your text messages. They are so clear. They are so understandable. I have no trouble understanding them, as opposed to other people who text like with all this, how can I say it, like text lingo, where everything is abbreviated and it's like BFF, like what the heck is that type thing, And I said to her, well, maybe there's a reason for good grammar and good spelling.
Exactly.
Oh, but my pediatrician tells me an interesting story about technology.
Yeah.
He said his wife worked as a cashier, and she was like one of the older cashiers. She was in her 50s at the time, and all the other cashiers were like young people in their early 20s. And the computer crashed. Something happened to the computer, and all the cash registers could not function because they were all computerized. She took out a big piece of paper, took the next customer, and just wrote everything down longhand and added it up and continued working while everyone else there just sat and did nothing and waited for the computers to get rebooted.
Oh wow, that's really cool. We're running
See
out
what a
of
good see what a good education can do for you.
yes, a good education,
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
What about barcodes and yeah, I think
Yeah, I remember they
barcodes.
first came out with barcodes. It was, what's that? Oh, barcode. What's the barcode? Well, I remember one time one of our computers, we had some problem with our internet connection or something, and so we had to do something with the computer. So I called our server at the time. I think it's called the server, the one that provides you with your internet service. I called the server.
Yeah.
So I called, it was Verizon. I called Verizon. And so she decided she was going to walk me through it. So she says, first of all, she says, make sure all the wires are connected to your router. I go, my what? Your router. Your what? My what? What's a router? She goes, you know that big, tall, cylindrical thing that's next to the computer screen? I go, what's that? She goes, that's actually the computer. That's your hard drive and your computer. I go, that's my computer? She goes, yes. I said, oh, I thought the screen was my computer. She says, no, the screen is the screen. The real computer is in that long, tall, cylindrical thing. So she says, I want you to press your hard drive. My what? Your hard drive. What's that? So she says, you know what? She says, why don't you just give me the passcode to your computer and we will fix it by remote control. So I did that. I gave her the passcode and I just sat there looking at the screen as all the stuff is bouncing around and turning on, turning off, bouncing, turning on, turning off, turning off. Finally, it took about like 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. The whole thing was fixed and she returned control of my computer to me and I thanked her. So there was a woman in our congregation who this woman was operating computers when they were in their infancy. And this woman, brilliant woman, knew all the ins and outs of what to do with every computer. And so we used to joke around about how computer ignorant I was among the technologically challenged. So I came over to brag to her. I said, you should see what I did. We had trouble with our internet connection and you should see how I fixed my computer. She goes, yeah? I said, yeah. I said, I pressed this code. I pressed that code. I pressed this button. I pressed that button. And she goes, yeah, yeah. And I go, and I gave my passcode over to Verizon and had them totally fix it by remote control because I didn't know what the guy was doing. He cracks up laughing.
Oh my
And she
God.
says to me, look, who cares? It's fixed.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I have those problems right now when like I'm at work and I'm trying to get something done, trying to resolve an issue, and it gets to a point where, like I'm Googling all the answers, and like I'm not getting anything. And I finally just, contact IT. And it gets to a point where the IT is like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what to do. And like we have to just figure things out. Like I had this one issue with my work. I had like the computer program I was using to draft all my architectural drawings, and it wasn't working properly. So like it took me the whole day and a half to like have these IT issues, but like it was just crazy. It was just ridiculous.
What happened? Were your IT people ever able to fix it or to solve the problem?
No, I mean it still had issues, still were problems, and whatnot, but whatever. It is what it is.
Did you talk to John? Did you talk to John?
Oh, I see what
Was
you're
it
saying.
John? Did John fix your problem? Was it John or
Yeah.
Kevin?
Yeah, actually, no joke. I had this one person call me up while we were driving, and I decided to go ahead and pull a prank with them because they were trying to be like, what's your name, what's your information, blah blah blah, and like, is your TV on, yada yada yada. And then like I was like, yeah, sure, of course, my TV's on. And then like I had this whole thing where it's like, wait, hold on, I hold on one second. I feel like I see somebody outside my house. I don't know what's going on. Can you wait one moment? And like I made it sound like I was getting murdered, and then turned off the phone. I thought it was funny. I thought it was entertaining.
It's funny. Well, this past week, I had a tech problem, a horrible tech problem. What happened was we went to the beach. So we went over to the parking thing, and you're supposed to you know I've done this before. You put your credit card in, you put how much time you want, and a piece of paper comes out, and you put it on your dashboard, right? Well,
Yeah.
this machine was not working.
Mm-hmm.
So it said to it said there was a big poster over it that said to download the mobile app, the parking mobile app, and that way it'd be easier. So I downloaded the parking mobile app. I put in the information, like you put in, they have the number of the parking zone you are and your location, and you fill in your license plate number.
Yeah.
And I went to, I pressed, to what's it, when you want to pay at the end, going, to pay at the end, pay, finalize, pay.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't let me. So it said, it wanted my, my email address. So I put in my email address, and I had set up, when I got this mobile app, I set up a code, a regular passcode. It says, "What's your passcode?" Put it in. Sorry, we don't have any passcode or email by that address. I go, what? So finally, I'm doing this over and over and over again, and I'm here at the beach. I want to get to the beach, and the heat is stifling. It's Florida, and the heat is really, I'm in the sun, and the heat. So and I had just gotten over being sick, so I feel about to pass out. So I called their 877 number, and it said to talk to a real person costs you $5. Hell, I don't care. I'll pay $1,000 at this point. Just get me in touch with a human being. So I got in touch with John, and John tried to put the information through, and it wasn't working. So he says, hold the line, let me see what I can do. And he's gone for like about 5 minutes. He comes back, okay. He says, it should be fixed now. What's your license plate number? He gives him my information. Still doesn't work, tries again. Finally, it was like the 10th time it finally went through. I don't know what it is. And I'm seeing all these other people are coming over to these parking things, and they're putting the information in their mobile app, and they're clicking, and they're just walking right onto the beach. No, not me. I'm sitting there in the heat for like a half an hour trying to get this thing to work. I'm telling you, technology does not like me.
Well, that's our time. I love you, Ima. Have a wonderful weekend. Have a wonderful Yom Tov. I'll see you soon.
Chag Sameach, sweetheart.
Sameach.
Love you.
Love you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook at Jewish Boy Calls His Mother. I know you would like it, and my mother would too.